Maria had always believed that music could heal even the deepest wounds. Back in the Philippines, she used to sing lullabies to her son Eli when thunderstorm winds rattled their tin roof home. But everything changed the night the typhoon came. It tore through their small coastal village, swallowing their house and taking away her husband, leaving behind nothing but shattered dreams and a guitar that somehow survived. For months, Maria sang no songs. Eli, only 12, would stare at that guitar like it carried his father's voice inside it. When neighbors told them about work opportunities in Ireland, she gathered all her courage, borrowed money for tickets, and whispered to Eli, "We'll start again." Somewhere people still believe in miracles. In Dublin, the air was cold and foreign. Maria found work cleaning in a small cafe while Eli played his guitar outside on weekends. The first time he sang, passers-by stopped and listened. His voice was gentle but filled with longing. Soon, Maria began joining him, her harmonies wrapping around his notes like a warm embrace. They never earned much, just a few coins, sometimes a meal, but every song was a step away from grief. People began recognizing them as the singing mother and son. They didn't realize that behind every smile was hunger, behind every laugh was a memory of home. One evening, as they performed near Temple Bar, a woman stopped to film them. She told them about Ireland's Got Talent auditions happening the next week. Eli's eyes sparkled. "Mama, we have to try. Maybe this is the sign Dad sent." Maria smiled weakly, terrified inside. They had no fancy clothes, no professional background, no money for travel. But Eli's excitement was contagious. He held her hand and said, "You always told me to believe in songs, Mama. So let's sing for him." That night, she stayed awake practicing, whispering the lyrics through tears. For the first time in years, she prayed, not for wealth, but for courage. The morning of the audition arrived cold and gray. Hundreds of contestants filled the theater, some with makeup teams, some with confidence that filled the room. Maria and Eli sat quietly in a corner, their guitar wrapped in an old towel. When it was finally their turn, the stage lights nearly blinded them. Eli gripped her hand tightly. The judges stared with curiosity, especially Simon Cowell. "What brings you to Ireland's Got Talent?" he asked. Eli stepped forward shyly and said, "We came here to sing for my dad in heaven." The crowd grew silent. Simon's expression softened, his usual edge fading into genuine empathy. The music began, a soft piano track, and Maria took the first line. Her voice trembled, then found strength as Eli joined her. Their voices blended like two souls healing each other. You could feel every heartbreak, every night they spent hoping for a better life. The audience was motionless, tears glistening on faces. Halfway through the song, Maria glanced at her son, remembering the man who used to sing beside her, and suddenly the pain turned into something beautiful. The final note hung in the air, delicate as a prayer. Then, a wave of applause crashed over them. People stood, cheering and crying. Maria covered her mouth, overwhelmed. Eli's eyes widened, shining under the lights. Simon stood slowly, clapping. That, he said, was pure, honest, and unforgettable. The other judges nodded in agreement. Maria could barely breathe as she whispered to Eli, "We did it." He hugged her tightly, whispering, "He's proud of us, Mama." As they walked off the stage, confetti still floating in the air from the last act, neither of them knew that their lives were about to change forever. They just knew that for the first time since the storm, they had found home again, not in a place, but in a song. Backstage, Maria could barely hold back her tears as Eli clung to her arm, trembling with joy. The moment they stepped off the stage, staff members and contestants surrounded them, congratulating them and replaying the clip of their performance on their phones. Maria stared at the screen in disbelief, it didn't even feel real. She saw herself singing, eyes closed, voice shaking, and yet the entire theater had risen for them. Eli, usually quiet, kept saying over and over, "Mama, they liked us. They really liked us." Simon's voice still echoed in her head, "That was the most beautiful duet I've ever heard." Maria had spent years feeling invisible, just another worker cleaning floors no one noticed. But in that single moment, the world had seen her, and her son, for who they truly were. Alicia Dixon leaned over to the other judges, whispering something, and before anyone realized what was happening, she slammed the golden buzzer. The sound of it startled Maria. Gold confetti burst into the air like a storm of light. Eli froze, eyes wide, and then screamed with joy. He jumped into Maria's arms as golden paper rained over them. The crowd exploded in cheers, and the stage transformed into a dream. Maria could hardly breathe, her chest filled with laughter and tears all at once. The host shouted, "Maria and Eli, you're going straight to the live shows." The words barely sank in. They stood in the middle of that golden rain, holding each other tightly, the confetti sticking to their wet faces. When Eli looked up, he whispered, "Papa saw this, Mama." "I know he did." And she believed him. Overnight, their audition video spread across the internet. Within hours, millions of people watched it, sharing comments about how the mother and son reminded them of hope and family. Some said their voices healed something inside them. News outlets called them the Golden Family from the Philippines. Maria's phone never stopped buzzing, reporters, fans, even old friends back home. But fame came with weight too. Some strangers online mocked their accents or called it a pity story. Maria tried not to read the hurtful comments, but sometimes late at night, she couldn't help it. She'd sit quietly, scrolling through messages, tears falling silently while Eli slept. But then she'd see one comment saying, "Their song made me call my mom again," and it reminded her why they sang: to connect, to heal, to love. As the semifinals approached, pressure began to build. They practiced daily, but Maria's new cleaning shifts were long and tiring. She often came home late, her hands raw and cracked, while Eli waited with the guitar ready. He'd play softly when she entered, humming tunes to keep her spirits alive. "Don't give up, Mama," he'd say every night before bed. But she worried, what if the magic of their first audition couldn't be repeated? What if they disappointed everyone who believed in them? Yet every time she looked at Eli's hopeful eyes, courage returned. They decided to perform "You Raise Me Up," a song that carried every ounce of their faith and pain. The night of the semifinal was tense. Backstage, Maria prayed silently as Eli tuned his guitar. When their names were called, they stepped out into blinding lights and roaring applause. The first note trembled, but soon their harmony filled the hall again, soft at first, then soaring like the wind. The audience grew silent, some holding their chests, others wiping tears. By the time they reached the final chorus, Maria's voice cracked with emotion, but Eli carried her through, steady and strong. The final note hung in the air like sunlight breaking through clouds. The judges rose to their feet. Simon wiped his eyes and said, "You two remind us what real music feels like. It's not about perfection, it's about heart." The crowd chanted their names as Maria and Eli hugged in the center of the stage. They didn't know yet if they had won, but in that moment, they didn't need to. They had already conquered the hardest thing of all, fear. When they walked off stage hand in hand, Maria smiled through her tears and whispered, "No matter what happens, Eli, we've already made our dream come true." And he answered softly, "We're singing for heaven now, Mama." The night of the grand finale arrived like a storm of nerves and excitement. The theater was glowing with lights, cameras flashing from every corner, and thousands of people waiting to see who would become the next champion of Ireland's Got Talent. Maria and Eli stood backstage, holding hands, the same way they had on their very first audition day. But this time, something was different. The world knew them. People shouted their names from the audience, holding signs that said, "Golden Family," and, "We love Maria and Eli." Maria could feel her heart pounding so hard it hurt, but she smiled through it, whispering to her son, "We sing with love, no matter what happens tonight." Eli nodded, his little hands trembling but his eyes shining. They had chosen a song they wrote together called, "Two Hearts, One Dream." It told their story, the loss, the journey, the courage to keep going. When the host announced their names, the lights dimmed, and the theater fell silent. A soft piano began to play, and Eli strummed his guitar gently. His voice entered first, smooth and innocent, followed by Maria's, strong yet trembling with emotion. Their harmonies intertwined like a prayer. The lyrics spoke of finding light after darkness, of believing in love even when the world seems cruel. Every word carried the memory of their struggles, the typhoon, the hunger, the long nights singing on cold streets. As the song reached its final verse, Maria glanced upward, imagining her husband smiling down from the heavens. Her voice cracked, and tears filled her eyes, but she kept singing. Eli stepped closer, took her hand, and together they finished the song in perfect harmony. When the last note faded, there was a long, breathtaking silence. Then, the entire audience rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, and crying all at once. Simon Cowell stood, visibly emotional, and said, "That was perfection. You two are what this show is all about: heart, hope, and love." The moment of truth arrived. All the finalists stood together under the bright lights, their hands shaking as the host read out the results. Maria and Eli closed their eyes, whispering a prayer. The crowd chanted their names again and again. And then came the words that changed everything. The winners of Ireland's Got Talent are Maria and Eli. The theater exploded with cheers. Confetti rained down like gold stars. Maria fell to her knees, overwhelmed, as Eli hugged her tightly, crying uncontrollably. They had done it. Against all odds, the poor mother and her little boy had won the hearts of a nation. Simon smiled proudly and said, "You've just written one of the most beautiful chapters in this show's history." A few weeks later, the bright lights faded, but their story didn't end. They returned to the Philippines, greeted by neighbors and friends who watched their journey online. The small fishing village that once drowned in despair now filled with music again. With part of their prize money, Maria rebuilt their old home and used the rest to open a small music school. They named it Harmony House, a place for underprivileged children to learn instruments and find their voices. Every wall was painted with colorful murals of musical notes and hearts. Eli taught guitar to younger kids, while Maria gave vocal lessons. Children from the neighborhood gathered there after school, laughing and singing. Sometimes, Maria would pause during a lesson, watching her son guide a student, and she'd whisper to herself, "He's becoming the man his father would have been proud of." They were invited to sing at community events, schools, and even on TV, but they always returned home before sunset, to the same quiet place by the shore where their journey had begun. One evening, as the orange sky melted into the sea, Eli sat beside his mother, strumming his guitar softly. "Mama," he said, "do you think Dad can hear us from heaven?" Maria smiled, her eyes glistening. "Of course, Eli. Every time we sing, he listens." The wind carried the sound of their music over the waves, a song of love, courage, and rebirth. The world had given them applause, fame, and recognition, but for Maria and Eli, the real victory was knowing that their music had turned pain into purpose. As the stars began to appear, Eli whispered, "Dreams really do come true, Mama." She looked at him, smiling through her tears, and answered softly, "Yes, my son, when love leads the way, every dream sings."